Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm 35, and for most of my life, I've been the invisible son of a very visible man. You see, my father, Jonathan Holloway, is the founder of Holloway & Company, a major construction and real estate empire in Texas. To the world, he's a titan. To me, he's always been a ghost. A presence so large it eclipsed any space I could claim for myself. People say growing up in a rich family is like winning the lottery. But what they don't know is that sometimes, wealth doesn't buy love, it buries it. I work at the company as Deputy Director of Finance. I've worked there for 12 years. I keep the numbers clean, the budget's tight, and the projects profitable. 3 years ago, I personally averted a near catastrophe on a Dallas expansion project. Quietly. Efficiently. No headlines, no speeches. Just a quick pat on the back from HR and a new round of accolades, for my younger brother, Damien. Damien Holloway. The heir apparent. The golden child. Same last name, very different lives. He's charming. Loud. Charismatic. And he's screwed up more contracts than I care to count, but Dad always finds a way to spin it. It was a learning experience, he's got leadership potential, this is what visionaries do. Me. I'm the reliable one. That's code for the guy who picks up the pieces. But I swallowed it. All of it. For years. Because deep down, I believed if I worked hard enough, if I kept showing up, eventually, he'd see me. But nothing prepared me for what he did at the company's 40th anniversary gala. The night started like any other corporate celebration, glittering lights, champagne fountains, and board members who'd never looked me in the eyes suddenly acting like they knew my name. My wife, Layla, was glowing in a navy blue gown. She's the only reason I haven't walked away from this family circus. She believes in me in ways that terrify me. Ways my own father never could. I remember her squeezing my hand as we entered the ballroom. "You're the heart of this company, Marcus," she whispered. "He just refuses to admit it." I smiled, but inside, I was drowning. My father took the stage later that evening. Spotlights warmed his silver hair and tanned face, and when he spoke, the room went still. He thanked the board. The investors. The staff. Then he smiled and said, "Tonight, we also look to the future. To leadership. Legacy." My heart started racing. Was this it? Was this finally my moment? "I'm proud to announce," he continued, "that my son Damien will take over as Chief Executive Officer of Holloway & Company effective January 1st. The crowd erupted in applause. I didn't. I couldn't. Because I wasn't even mentioned. Not a thank you. Not a nod. Not a glance in my direction. He stood there, my father, my blood, lifting a glass toward Damien like he'd handed the crown to a worthy king. And all I could do was sit there, clapping like a stranger watching someone else's life play out. When the noise died down, he added with a smug grin, "And of course, Marcus will continue doing what he does best, keeping the numbers neat and tidy." Laughter. I felt Layla stiffen beside me. I don't remember the next few minutes clearly. Just the sound of my pulse in my ears. Just my hand trembling as I reached for my wine glass and missed. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like blood. The table laughed again. It was humiliating. And then, just as I stood up, ready to walk out of that room forever, a man I didn't recognize approached me. He was older, sharp eyes, well-dressed but not flashy. He extended his hand. "Marcus Holloway," he said. "Yes," I replied, trying to compose myself. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You look just like her." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" He pulled out a worn photo. My knees nearly buckled. It was a picture of my mother. Not the polished woman from our family portraits. Not the one in pearls beside my father in magazines. But a young woman. Barefoot. Laughing. Standing next to a man who wasn't my father. He handed me a business card. "My name is Richard Langston," he said. "We need to talk. But not here." He walked away, leaving me with the photo, the card, and a truth I hadn't known existed. Layla leaned in. Who was that? I looked down at the photo again, then back at the stage where my father and Damien were toasting each other like kings. "I don't know," I whispered. "But something tells me I'm about to find out who I really am." I didn't sleep that night. Layla kept asking questions, gently, patiently. Who was he? Why did he have a photo of your mother? What did he mean, "You look just like her"? But I didn't have answers. Only a storm inside me. That photo haunted me. I stared at it for hours after the gala, seated in my home office under the soft flicker of a desk lamp. My mother looked alive. Not like the woman I remembered who withered slowly under the pressure of being Jonathan Holloway's wife. In this photo, she was radiant. Her smile was genuine. Her arm wrapped around a man whose face bore an unsettling resemblance to mine. I looked at the name on the business card again. Richard Langston. Founder and CEO, Langston Renewables. Private Mobile. Langston Renewables. I knew the name. Everyone in Texas's energy sector did. Langston's company was pioneering solar and wind integration in oil fields, making enemies of the old guard. Including, very likely, my father. I couldn't stop replaying the words, "You look just like her." The next morning, while the house was quiet and the world was still waking up, I called the number. He picked up after the first ring. "Marcus," he said, calm and measured, like he'd been expecting the call his entire life. "Why do you have that picture of my mother?" I asked, my voice cracked and dry. "I'll explain everything," he said. "Meet me today. 11 o'clock. There's a place just outside of town. Quiet." He gave me the address of a small cafe tucked behind a gas station off Route 6. Nothing fancy. Hidden. I didn't tell Layla I was going. I didn't tell anyone. When I pulled up, Richard Langston was already there, seated by the window, sipping black coffee like he owned time itself. He stood when he saw me. "Thank you for coming." "I don't even know why I'm here," I muttered, sliding into the booth. "I think you do," he said, locking eyes with me. "Your mother, Elena, meant everything to me. We were in love. Before Jonathan. Before all of this." I stared at him, disbelieving. "That's impossible. My mother and my father, Jonathan, they were together since college." Richard shook his head. "That's what he wanted the world to think. But it's not true." He pulled out a folder. Inside was a series of photographs, old letters, and one particularly damning document, a paternity test, unsigned but dated 1988, around the time I was born. My throat closed. "You're telling me?" "I'm saying there's a reason Jonathan has always treated you like a problem to manage, and Damien like a prince. You were never his son, Marcus. Not biologically. You're mine." My world tilted. All at once, it made sense, the coldness, the disregard, the humiliation. I had always blamed myself, thought I wasn't enough. But maybe I was just a living reminder of a truth my father never wanted to admit. "I didn't abandon her," Richard continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Your grandfather forced her to marry Jonathan. Said she'd ruin the Holloway name if she stayed with me. I had no money then. Nothing to offer her except love. And love wasn't enough in that house. I couldn't breathe. I stood up, pacing. So all this time, I've been living a lie. You've been surviving one, he said softly. I ran a hand through my hair. You could have come sooner. Told me. Richard didn't flinch. You were a boy. Jonathan would have destroyed me, and you. I waited until I had something to protect you with. And now. I do. He slid another envelope across the table. Inside was a legal document with a signature at the bottom, Catherine Holloway, my mother. It was a signed statement declaring that if anything ever happened to her, Richard Langston was to be informed of Marcus's well-being. There was a date, a witness signature. My mother had written this, months before her death. She never stopped thinking about you, I whispered, my hands trembling. She never stopped loving you, or me. I slumped into the booth, the weight of it all crashing down. You were never meant to be part of that world, Marcus. But they made sure you stayed, to erase me. To break your mother. The tears came without warning. Years of being unseen, unwanted, second best, all of it poured out in one overwhelming flood. I felt like a child again. The little boy who used to sit on the staircase, listening to his father praise Damien's science fair project while ignoring the fact that I'd won the state math championship. I thought of my mother, how tired her eyes looked near the end. How quiet she became. How I never understood why she'd stop talking when Jonathan walked into the room. Until now. I have nothing, I whispered. Nothing to show for all these years. That's not true, Richard said. You have your integrity. Your brilliance. And now, you have the truth. I wiped my eyes. And what am I supposed to do with that? His eyes narrowed slightly. Whatever you want. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the old photo of my mother, the one where she was smiling, truly smiling, and wondering what kind of life we might have had if she'd made a different choice. But she didn't. She sacrificed everything for me. And now, I had a choice to make. Stay in the shadows. Or step into the light, and make them pay. I didn't go to work the next day. Instead, I sat on the back porch, staring at the envelope Richard had given me. Inside was the document, my mother's signed statement, and a thumb drive. I hadn't looked at the contents of the drive yet. I was too afraid. Too raw. Layla joined me just after sunrise, a mug of tea in one hand, concern in her eyes. You didn't sleep, she said, sitting beside me. No. She waited, as she always did, patiently, lovingly. Then I told her everything. Every word. Every photo. Every truth. By the time I finished, she was gripping my hand so tightly it hurt. He treated you like garbage, she whispered. All these years, and you thought it was your fault. Marcus, this changes everything. Does it? I asked bitterly. Does it really? I'm still the guy who gets ignored in boardrooms. I'm still the one cleaning up Damien's messes. I'm still. You're not a Holloway, she cut in. That's what you're not. And that means you owe them nothing. We stared out at the gray morning sky. Somewhere, a mockingbird sang like it didn't know the world could fall apart. Then I opened the thumb drive. Inside were scanned letters. Dozens of them. All written by my mother to Richard. Some were hopeful, others heartbroken. But one stood out. It was dated a month before she died. Richard. I've tried to protect Marcus. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying quiet, by giving him a stable home. But I see now that I was wrong. Jonathan is turning him into something he's not. Cold. Quiet. Ashamed. I see how he looks at Damien. How he tries so hard to earn affection that never comes. And it's killing me. If anything ever happens to me, please, find him. Help him. Let him know he was always loved. That he was never a mistake. Catherine. I read that letter 5 times. Then I broke. I sobbed like I hadn't since I was a child. Layla held me through it all, whispering, "You were never a mistake," over and over again until the shaking stopped. It was like something shattered inside me, something I didn't even know I'd been holding together all these years. The version of me that thought I was worthless, began to crack. And in its place, something else started forming. Anger. Resolve. Fire. I wasn't going to let my mother's wishes die in ink. I was going to honor them. Later that afternoon, I started digging. I pulled up the company's private server from my home computer. The internal audit reports. The contracts Damien had signed in the last 3 years. I knew the passwords. Hell, I'd built the system. And what I found? God. Damien had been bleeding the company dry. Unauthorized bonuses, side deals with third-party contractors, manipulated forecasts. It was worse than I imagined. One document made my blood run cold, a partnership with a shell company that had funneled over $2.4 million into what was labeled logistical consulting. But the company didn't exist. It was a front. And Dad had approved the payment. He had to know. They were both dirty. All this time, I thought I was just being passed over. I didn't realize I'd been kept on the outside, because they were hiding the rot. I printed everything. Every spreadsheet, every suspicious email, every forged expense line. I labeled them, cross-referenced them, color-coded the damn lies. Then I locked it all away in a private cloud folder with restricted access. Just me and Layla. I stared at the files and realized, I had the power to burn it all down. But that's not what I wanted. Not yet. I didn't want destruction. I wanted exposure. I wanted truth. I wanted them to look me in the eyes as the foundation they built their empire on crumbled, and know that it was me who tore it down. Not out of spite. Out of justice. And love. For my mother. For the child I used to be. For the man I was finally becoming. Layla walked into the room and saw the files spread across the floor. Her eyes widened. "What is this?" "Insurance," I said. "And a blueprint." "A blueprint for what?" "For revenge." She knelt beside me and picked up a photo of my mother. "Then let's do it right. There's a moment, right before revenge truly begins, when the pain turns cold." That moment came for me 3 days after I uncovered the fraud. I stood in the mirror that morning, tying my usual navy blue tie. It looked exactly like the one I wore at the gala. But this time, something had shifted behind my eyes. I no longer saw a man desperate to be seen. I saw a man who was about to make his own shadow visible. I wasn't going to just walk away from Holloway and Company. Not yet. That would be too easy for them. I needed to be inside, to maneuver, to gather, to strike. The morning I returned to work, Damien greeted me like nothing had happened. He was sitting at my desk, legs kicked up, sipping my coffee like he owned the oxygen in the building. "Big night, huh?" he smirked. "Crazy how Dad finally made the announcement. Thought he was gonna keep it secret another month." I didn't say a word. He tapped the side of his head. "Don't take it personally, bro. You're good with numbers. But you're not exactly built for pressure." He stood and slapped me on the shoulder, then walked out laughing. If he only knew. That day, I started phase 1. Step 1, gain allies quietly. I reached out to 3 senior executives I trusted, people I'd helped through tough quarters, saved from budget cuts, and covered for when Damien had left projects in shambles. People who owed me. And more importantly, people who were fed up. I scheduled private meetings under the guise of departmental restructuring analysis. In hushed tones, I showed them the spreadsheets, the shell company payments, the signatures. All 3 were stunned. "Are you sure about this?" one of them, Maria, asked. I triple-checked. "It's all here. He's been siphoning money out of the company for years, and Jonathan's been signing off. She looked at me, then slowly nodded. What do you need? I need your silence, your support, and when the time comes, your vote. Step 2, Legal Prep. Layla recommended someone, her old college roommate, Tony Nguyen. Tony was now a corporate attorney with a mean streak and a razor-sharp memory. We met in secret at her private office. She reviewed the files I compiled and didn't blink. This is a securities violation, misrepresentation, possibly wire fraud, she said, flipping through the folder. If this went public, both of them would be investigated by the SEC. You could burn the entire company to the ground. That's not what I want, I said. I want control. I want them out. I want the legacy of my mother restored, not ruined. Tony leaned back. You want a coup? Yes, I said. But clean. Legal. Undeniable. She smiled. Then we'll do it like chess. Not checkers. Step 3, Strategic Positioning. Tony advised me to begin acquiring shares quietly, through shell LLCs, through sympathetic third parties. Richard helped with that. Within 3 weeks, we had discreetly accumulated 12% of Holloway & Company's private shares. It wasn't enough to take the company outright. But it was enough to call a vote. According to the corporate bylaws Jonathan himself wrote 20 years ago, any shareholder holding more than 10% of the company had the right to call an extraordinary general meeting. It was perfect. On the surface, it looked like a routine shift. Underneath, it was a revolution. I filed the paperwork anonymously through our proxy firm. Within 48 hours, the board was buzzing. Jonathan summoned me to his office. Marcus, he said, his voice slick with forced calm. Do you know anything about this special shareholder meeting that just got called? I tilted my head slightly. No, sir. Must be someone with concerns. His jaw twitched. Is this you trying to stir up trouble? I'm just a numbers guy, I said. Remember? He studied me, searching for cracks. He found none. Later that night, I met with Richard and Tony again. We now had 14% of the shares secured and another 8% pledged by disgruntled board members who were tired of Damien's recklessness. That brought us to 22%. It was close. Too close. We needed one more domino. Then came the break I never expected. Maria, one of the executives I had confided in, called me one evening and whispered, I have something you need to hear. She sent me an audio file. It was Damien, in a drunken haze at a client dinner, bragging about how he was cooking the books to funnel money through fake contracts for personal security stuff. I don't even care, man, he slurred. My dad signs anything I send. He's old. Half the time, he doesn't even read it. Marcus? He's like a glorified calculator. Let him run the reports, I'll run the company. It was the match I needed for the fire. Tony grinned when she heard the audio. We've got them. We go public with this at the meeting. Game over. I nodded, a wave of emotions crashing into me, relief, anger, a flicker of fear. And beneath it all, something else. Pride. I looked at the framed photo of my mother I now kept in my office. We're almost there, I whispered. I promise, I'll make it right. I called Layla as I left the office. Everything's ready, I said. She didn't ask what I meant. She already knew. She simply said, then it's time to remind them who they underestimated. The morning of the shareholder meeting was unusually calm. The sky over Houston was a flat, pale gray. No thunder. No fireworks. Just the slow, humming stillness before a storm. Layla stood behind me at the bathroom mirror as I buttoned my shirt. She smoothed my collar and kissed the back of my neck. You ready? She whispered. No, I said. But I'm going anyway. I didn't feel brave. I felt focused. Because today wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp, in the top-floor conference room of Holloway and Company, a room I'd only ever been invited to as an afterthought. But today, I walked in early. And this time, I chose my seat, not the one in the corner or the back row, but dead center, directly across from the head of the table where Jonathan Holloway sat. He looked up from a report and scowled slightly when he saw me. "Didn't realize you were invited, Marcus." "I invited myself," I said, placing my documents on the table. Around us, the room filled with executives, shareholders, attorneys. Damien strolled in 10 minutes late, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, looking like he'd just walked off a yacht. "This is such a waste of time," he muttered as he slumped into the seat next to our father. Tony entered right after him, dressed in a dark green suit, sharp as a blade. She gave me a curt nod and slid into the seat next to mine. At exactly 10 o'clock, the moderator, a senior board member named Deborah Langley, stood up and cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this extraordinary shareholders meeting. Today's session was called pursuant to a formal motion submitted by parties who now hold over 20% of private shares in Holloway and Company." Jonathan's brow twitched. I could see the math happening in his head. I leaned back in my chair. "Let it simmer." Deborah continued. "The meeting's purpose is to address allegations of financial misconduct within the company's leadership, and to call a vote on potential restructuring, including leadership reassignment." "What the hell is this?" Damien said loudly, sitting forward. "Who made this up?" "I did," I said calmly. Every head turned. Jonathan sat back, his face tightening like a fist. "You?" "Yes. As a shareholder now representing over 22% of voting power, I exercised my right to call this meeting." "Are you insane?" Damien barked. "You think anyone's going to take you seriously? Let's find out." Tony opened a folder and handed printed copies to each board member and investor present. "Exhibit A, evidence of misappropriated funds through shell entities," she announced. "Exhibit B, audio evidence of Mr. Damien Holloway admitting to falsifying documentation and exploiting his father's signature authority." Gasps echoed around the room as the audio began to play. "My dad signs anything I send. Marcus? He's like a glorified calculator." Jonathan's face drained of color. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the documents. Damien turned to him, whispering frantically, "It's fake, Dad. He's making this up." I stood up, my voice steady. "These are not just numbers. These are decisions that affected payrolls, partner trust, and shareholder confidence. I have tracked these transactions for 6 months. I have corroborating bank records, emails, and timestamps. This wasn't negligence, it was theft. Covered up by arrogance." Damien stood too, rage bubbling in his eyes. "You're just mad you didn't get picked. You've always been bitter. Always the sad little nobody in the back of the room. And yet here we are," I said, my voice low and sharp, "with you the one being investigated, and me the one holding the evidence." The silence was deafening. Jonathan slammed the table. "You think this makes you a leader? Exposing your own family in front of strangers?" "No," I said, stepping toward him. "What makes me a leader is finally refusing to protect people who've spent their lives destroying others behind the mask of family." Then I dropped the final blow. "I also have proof that the company used falsified reports in a federal bid last year," I said. "And I've submitted them to the authorities. But I gave this board the chance to act first, privately, before federal investigators come knocking." Chaos. Voices shouting. Chairs scraping. A few people stood up, trying to calm the room. Others were already whispering into phones. Jonathan's face looked like stone, carved with rage and disbelief. Then Deborah raised her hand. Enough. The board will now proceed with a motion to vote. All in favor of initiating a formal investigation, freezing Damian Holloway's executive access, and placing Jonathan Holloway under review as acting CEO, raise your hand. I didn't raise mine. I didn't need to. Because almost every other hand in the room did. Even people I thought were loyal to Jonathan, tired, maybe, of being silent accessories to dysfunction. Deborah counted. Motion passed. Damian shouted, "You're dead to me." "I was never alive to you," I said quietly. Then I turned to Jonathan. And I saw something I'd never seen in him before, not anger. Not arrogance. But fear. Real, hollow fear. Because for the first time in his life, someone had held him accountable. I walked out of that room without looking back. The war wasn't over. But the first strike had landed. And it landed hard. I should have known it wouldn't be over so easily. That night, I returned home thinking the war was half won. Layla poured me a glass of bourbon, and we sat on the patio in the dim summer heat, our hands entwined in silence. For the first time in years, I felt like I could exhale. "They're reeling," I said. Jonathan couldn't even speak. Damian nearly lost it. "I think, we finally broke them." Layla smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "What?" I asked. "I just don't trust them," she said. "Especially your father. Men like that, when they fall, they don't hit the ground quietly. They pull others down with them." I shrugged. "There's nothing left for him to pull. He lost the vote. Damian's locked out. The shareholders are calling for an external audit. Even the press got wind of something shaking inside Holloway and Company. It's done." I was wrong. The very next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. A single text from Tony. "Emergency. Turn on the news. Channel 5. Now." I ran to the living room and flipped on the TV. A local anchor was mid-report, breaking news as longtime Holloway and Company CEO Jonathan Holloway steps down from his role effective immediately. In a shocking twist, the company released a statement naming Damian Holloway as interim CEO, pending further review. I dropped the remote. "What?" I breathed. Layla sat up in bed. "No. That can't be real." I checked my email. Sure enough, a formal statement from the board's PR team sat in my inbox. "Due to health-related concerns, Mr. Jonathan Holloway is stepping away from day-to-day operations. Mr. Damian Holloway has agreed to resume leadership in an interim capacity until a full vote can be held later this fiscal quarter." Health-related? He looked just fine when he slammed the table yesterday. I called Tony. "They blindsided everyone," she said. "Your father met with several board members last night and spun the entire thing. Claimed he was being blackmailed with old documents, said Damian was being set up. Then he promised to step down to restore trust, but only if Damian could help stabilize things. They didn't even let the rest of the board vote." I hissed. "They didn't have to," Tony said. "Because Jonathan pulled a final trick. He transferred 6% of his shares to Damian before he stepped down. That number hit me like a punch. Because with those extra shares, Damian had enough proxy votes to override the restructuring process I triggered. They'd flipped the table. Again. I felt sick. All my planning, all the legal safeguards, it didn't matter if they played dirtier. "They're going to gut the board," Tony said. "You have about 48 hours before they fire every person loyal to you." I hung up without saying goodbye. I walked to the kitchen in a daze. Layla was waiting, her face pale, voice soft. "What now?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared out the window as something inside me snapped into focus. I tried to play fair. Tried to win clean. But Jonathan and Damian weren't just corrupt. They were ruthless. And if I was going to finish this, I had to be something I'd never allowed myself to be before. Unforgiving. That evening, I called Richard Langston. "I need your help," I said. "And I need your name." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You sure?" "I don't want to destroy Holloway and Company. I want to own it. And to do that, I need more shares." He took a deep breath. "I can acquire a controlling stake, quietly. But when I do, the world will know who I am. Who you are." "I'm ready," I said. "And Marcus," he added. "If you're truly ready, then drop the Holloway name. You're not one of them. Never were." His words shook me. But I knew he was right. I ended the call. Then I sat at my desk, opened a new document, and wrote out my legal name change application. From Marcus Jonathan Holloway to Marcus Richard Langston. I stared at it, trembling. This wasn't just paperwork. This was severance. Final. Freedom. That night, I didn't sleep. I worked. By morning, everything was in place. Richard moved quickly. He activated a trust he'd been building for years, acquiring private shares from longtime investors in exchange for high-yield renewable energy bonds. Clean, legal, and fast. In less than 48 hours, we had 51% ownership of Holloway and Company, through Langston holding subsidiaries. And no one saw it coming. Until we walked through the front doors of the company. Together. Me and Richard Langston. My real father. And we walked straight to the executive conference room, where Damien was sitting in my father's old chair. He jumped to his feet when he saw us. "What the hell is this?" I dropped the share ledger onto the table. "You're fired." He laughed, until Richard spoke next. "Under the bylaws of this company, as majority shareholder, I'm placing my son, Marcus Langston, as interim CEO effective immediately. Your access to financial systems is revoked. You don't have the right." Damien snapped. Richard just smiled. "I do now." Damien lunged at me, but two security officers entered the room. "Mr. Holloway," one of them said, "you need to leave the premises." Damien stared at me, face red, chest heaving. "This is war." I looked at him for the last time and said, "No, Damien. This is justice." He was escorted out. And I sat down in the chair that once belonged to a man who spent his entire life trying to make me feel small. I wasn't small anymore. And the nameplate they slid in front of me read: Marcus Langston, CEO. They say revenge is best served cold. But what they don't tell you is that justice, true justice, doesn't need to be served at all. It reveals itself. And the people who once held power? They watch as it slips through their fingers, piece by piece, until they're left with nothing but the echo of what they thought they controlled. It's been 3 months since I became CEO of Holloway and Company. Correction, Langston Holloway Industries. That's the new name. Because the name, Holloway, no longer stands for manipulation and favoritism. It stands for restoration. Truth. Balance. The first thing I did was restructure the leadership. Everyone who had quietly helped cover Damien's financial schemes, gone. Terminated with cause. Replaced with merit-based hires, many of them people who, like me, had been ignored, overlooked, or passed up. Maria now runs our global project operations. Tony, one of our most senior architects, was promoted to Chief Strategy Officer after years of Damien calling him the quiet guy in the corner. And Deborah Langley, who stood up during that emergency meeting, is now chair of the board. One by one, the ghosts of the old regime were cleared out. Jonathan? He disappeared from the public eye. I've heard whispers, he's moved to a small estate outside of Austin. He's not dying, like he told the board. That was another lie. He just couldn't handle the shame. He hasn't called. Not that I expected him to. As for Damien, after we submitted our internal findings to the proper agencies, he was forced to surrender several assets to avoid criminal charges. He lost his license to practice finance. Word is he's trying to start some kind of influencer podcast now. I wish I were joking. The truth is, I don't hate him. I pity him. He was raised on power, entitlement, and unchecked praise. And when accountability finally arrived, he crumbled. He wasn't built for truth. I was. Layla, God, Layla, has been my anchor through all of it. The night after I officially signed my name as Marcus Richard Langston on the new CEO charter, we stood on the balcony of our home. The same red brick house I once walked into feeling like a ghost. Now it feels like a fortress. She handed me a glass of wine and smiled. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said, turning toward her. "We did." She looked up at me with those deep brown eyes. "And your mom?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded toward the sky. "I think she'd be proud." Before I could say more, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old photo, the one Richard had given me at the gala. My mother, barefoot, laughing beside him. I framed it. And I placed it in the lobby of the company. Right below the new plaque that reads, "In honor of Catherine Langston. The quiet strength behind everything." Because this story was never just mine. It was hers. And I know, without a shred of doubt, that she's somewhere watching all of this unfold. And smiling. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.